All right, here we are. Hi, I'm Jamie. Welcome back. We're back with another video, and we have a special guest on hand. It is my son, Malcolm. Hi, Malcolm.
Hey, Dad, how's it going?
It's going great. Now, thanks so much for doing this. And this is the first time that I've done a collab video, at least on my end. Been on a Mazzy collab video and with the Blue Sky Vinyl, but it's great to have you on the show, Malcolm. Now, for those of you that may not know, I think I've mentioned it a few times. My son, Malcolm, we're not only separated by distance, we're also separated by the border. My son is currently living in Michigan, in the States, and I'm here in Ontario. So, of course, just in the news this week is that the borders now, closed until at least end of September now. I think the latest is September 21st or something like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep up with it all because they keep kind of like updating the rules and everything like that. But as far as I know, it's at least the end of September to any non-residents or or people without immediate family too. So now, like, if you have immediate family in Canada, but you're not a Canadian citizen, you can come across just to see them. But then there's these quarantine rules. You got to like stay isolated in one place for 14 days and all this stuff. So I'm just glad that I have the golden ticket, which is a Canadian passport to get me through if I need to.
Yeah, so, and this could all change tomorrow. So this is what's happening at press time. But this is really, like, we haven't seen each other since January. It's been a long, long time. So this is the only way that we're able to connect. So we thought we'd connect with music because just recently, Malcolm, we were chatting about, different bands, and there's a lot of bands that you enjoy that I have no idea who these bands are. Like, I've heard that maybe they're band names, but I don't really know any of their music. So I thought generationally this could be a lot of fun. So in terms of focusing on a band that I'm not familiar with, and then I mentioned a Canadian artist that you weren't familiar with, and it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you don't know this individual or the band that they came from. So we thought we'd do kind of a father-son kind of video collab generational sort of thing. So I think I can tell by the t-shirt or shirt that you're wearing who we're going to be talking about on your end.
Yeah, so my favorite band, a Canadian band, Protest the Hero, actually just came out with a new album. So to me, that was the most appropriate band to pick because I'm just obsessed with this new album. It's called Palimpsest from the band Protest the Hero. And I've liked them. I discovered them sometime in high school when they came out with their album Fortress, and then I had to kind of backtrack to listen to some of their early stuff. But yeah, for me, it took a long time for me to kind of like realize they're just my favorite band. Everything I like about like progressive, technical, heavy music they've done, and just every time they put out a new album, I'm just blown away, and I just have to do these deep dives. So yeah, I'm going to talk about Protest the Hero today. And this shirt, actually, I got a pre-order for their new album. So they had all these different like pre-order packages you could get. So I got this shirt, another shirt, the physical album, a digital download, and then they distributed it through a company called Sheets Happen, which produced like sheet music for bands and stuff like that. So they did all of the
Sheets Happen?
Yes, Sheets Happen. A really great company, though. I mean, like, they put out like a lot of YouTube content with the bands that they work with, and they produce like, their records for them and do a lot of distribution stuff like that. So they also like throw in some stickers and some pics and stuff like that. Yeah, so I figured I'd wear the shirt that came with the new album and yeah, talk about the band a little bit.
So you've heard the new album. What do you think of it?
It honestly, it might be my favorite yet. It's as close to perfect as I think you can get, honestly. So they're a really interesting band. They really technical progressive metal, I think, is the best kind of like genre you can put them in. And to me, this album is a really interesting kind of summation of all of their previous albums, kind of now in one. This album took a long time to actually come out with, too, because Rhodey, the lead vocalist, had some vocal problems, so we had to kind of like start and stop with the production of the new album and everything like that. But lyrically, and from a vocal performance, Rhodey is the clear standout in this latest album. I mean, you can just tell he's pushing himself to new limits. The lyrical quality is just really top notch. The playing is amazing. This is the second album with their new drummer too, and I think he's really found his position in the band too, which is really interesting. As a drummer, like, that's one of the things that really drew me to this band is Mo was their first drummer, and he was with them for 3 albums, and I loved him as a drummer because he wasn't super technical. He played very well, but he really just kept the band together. He played all these weird time signatures very, very well, and he kind of took his moments when they were there, but for the most part, he really just held the foundation of these really complex songs where there's just so much going on over top of them. And then he dropped out right before they were about to record, I think it was their third album, Volition, and they actually got the drummer from Lamb of God, Chris Adler, to come in and do the drums for that album. And that was really, really cool and exciting. I like what he did a lot, but I actually, and this is going to sound weird, I actually thought he was too busy for this band. I mean, some of the stuff he was doing, it was almost like, it was clean, it was clear, you could hear what was going on, but there was almost too much going on at times, like, especially with his footwork. He's known for being a very, technical footwork kind of a drummer, and I thought a lot of times it was a little too much, and it was kind of like, okay, there's too many things going on all stacked on top of each other. So again, really great drummer. I thought he did really, really cool, interesting parts, but like almost a little bit too much at times. And then they got their newest drummer, Mike, who I think really strikes a perfect balance between someone like Chris Adler, who has a much more modern kind of showy technique, and Mo Carson or Carlson, I can't remember, but Mo, who really was focused on just like holding the foundation of the songs. I think this new drummer actually really balances both of those areas really well and fits the newer sound of the band and where they're kind of going.
It can be tricky to have new members come into a band and then the band to keep going, and that can be a difficult thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, and they've lost 2 original members. So right now, the singer and the 2 guitarists are the only kind of original members. They lost their bassist, Arif, I think just right after Volition, actually. And then Mo they lost before Volition. So it's been a banded evolution, but I think most of the songwriting is pretty much in the hands of the vocalist and the 2 guitarists anyway. So I think that's how they've been able to keep moving forward and playing with other just really great players that can actually keep up with them.
Okay, now I didn't even know they were Canadian. There you go. I didn't know Protest the Hero were Canadian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They got their start on Much Music, if you remember. Like when they came out with their album Fortress, I want to say like 2012, around then, they really got like pushed on Much Music when Much Music was kind of like playing bands and sort of like taking over the MTV music video airspace. And then that's where they really kind of jumped, and they had this huge explosion, and it really put them to the top. And then they actually released a documentary later about like that whole scene and what happened there and why they, for some reason, just like jumped to the top all of a sudden, and then kind of like settled back down into kind of what I think they would consider their mainstay in terms of where they are in the music scene.
Okay. Now, do you have any of the albums to show? Because on their VC world, it's all about show and tell. I don't know if you've got any CDs that we can see the covers of or anything.
I have a few, yeah. So I'm missing one. I always collected CDs like when I was a kid and a little bit through high school, and then I stopped, and then I kind of became one of the digital download kind of people. I'm just now getting back into CDs, so my collection's a little all over the place. But I have their first big album, which was Protest the Hero.
Okay.
This was their first. Yeah, there you go. That was their first main album. A lot of great hits. It's a concept album split into 3 parts from 3 different perspectives of these people. It's a really great album. Fortress was their next one, and this is kind of when I discovered them. So that's again the album that was played a lot on Much Music and really just exploded the band kind of in their early days. I don't have Scurrilous, which was their next one. It wasn't as popularly received for a lot of people. To me, it was a fantastic album. To me, Scurrilous was kind of when they really found their matured sound, when you really can tell that the band like figured out how they want to approach progressive writing and progressive styles of music, which I thought was really cool. The album after that was Volition, and that was a cool album too because they actually crowdfunded that entire album. They stopped working with labels at all, and they actually crowdfunded the entire album, which was like they were one of the first bands to really do that and to like just embrace that idea of they had an Indiegogo page, and they had like all these different perks in terms of like if you paid $5 you got the digital download, if you paid $25 you got the digital download and the physical CD, and they had packages up to like I think you could pay like $1,000 or $2,000 and you could actually be featured on the album.
And that sounds like they were doing that way before others were, as you mentioned.
They were on like
now it's almost commonplace.
Yeah, like a lot of people do that now. It wasn't as like you had heard of it, but it was not commonplace for like a legit band to try to do something like that. Like crowdfunding was really just for like, oh, I had this cool product and I don't want to try to go to a venture capitalist to get it made, but it's like this little gizmo that like is kind of niche, you know what I mean? They were really one of the first bands to like try to do that, and it was really cool. Like anyone that contributed is in the liner notes, so like my name is actually in the liner notes of their album, which is
didn't know that. You've never shown that to me.
Yeah, well,
I don't think.
I don't think they did digital albums because I don't have a physical copy. They only did digital. They didn't do physical. So I don't think I have that physical album. But I somewhere in like a PDF somewhere on my old computer, I think there's a credit line, and my name is one of many names in there for contributing to the crowdfunder. And then I think I paid like I think I contributed like $50, and so I got like a limited edition crew neck too.
Oh, very good. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I got all the swag just from.
Yes, you're included on the album, but you can only access it through a CD-ROM.
Yeah, and then after that they had Pacific Myth. Again, I never bought the physical album for that one. I just bought it off iTunes later on. That one was kind of cool too because they did something kind of different for that one too. Is they actually did like a subscription thing. So you bought like a 5-month subscription, and then they released one song a month for like 5 months, and then that was the album. Or maybe it was 6 months, I think. But then that also included like a documentary that they released, behind the scenes footage and all this kind of stuff. So they're always like trying new things, which is really cool. And then obviously just last month they released Palimpsest. So this is the album. In a very nice case, you know, you got the kind of the big open with the credits in the middle and the CD on the right, and then the little booklet that goes with it and everything like that.
They kind of have an American flag thing kind of going on.
Yeah, so that's definitely a theme of the album. Is sort of this is what I would almost call tragic Americana. The whole like this is kind of the big spread art for the whole album. You can kind of see this big. And then each song in the album kind of is thematically paired with like an animal. So you can see here like one's a bunny, one's a dog, and a canary, and all these kinds of things. And it's really interesting. Lyrically, it's a complex album that really was interested in dealing, I think, with some issues. The first song they released was The Canary, and that song was pretty much all about Amelia Earhart and her disappearing in the Bermuda Triangle. The second single that they released was From the Sky. And that, when you really listen to it, it's all about the Hindenburg disaster and kind of how that was sort of captured in a photo and then used as like a pop culture reference, but it's like this huge American tragedy that happened in the States, I should say.
Yeah, okay.
The rest of the album is really filled with just kind of interesting songs about tragedies and unfortunate events that happened all throughout American history. My favorite song on this record has to be Little Snakes, which is all about the Mount Rushmore, the kind of the stealing of indigenous lands, the search for gold there, the breaking of treaties, then like carving these American faces into the side of a mountainside of people that didn't really have very positive things to say about indigenous peoples in the United States. It's yeah, you can really tell if you deep dive into the lyrics, you can really tell Rhodey really did his research on a lot of these things, and there's a lot of like things just kind of sprinkled all throughout the lyrics that's like, oh, okay, like you researched this topic, you did a deep dive, you didn't just do like, I don't know, like a Wikipedia search and then was like, okay, I can write a song about this. Like you can really tell he dove into the material and tried to learn about the different perspectives and about the tragedies that were involved in all these things. So it's a very American-centric album, which personally I find very interesting as a Canadian band, because I'm curious why they decided to go so American, because honestly, a lot of these themes they explore, they could have done in Canadian culture as well. So,
yeah, but maybe just trying to go to that next level of international.
Yeah, there's always that too. You know,
appealing to the American market.
Criticizing the Americans will always get you a little farther.
Take some attention. Here we are talking about it. Exactly. So for you, if somebody's not familiar with Protest the Hero, what's the go-to album, or what do you think is the first album that you should maybe explore?
I think the album that always kind of put them on the charts and really put them in the public view was Fortress, this one here. Fortress, I think, is a really great introduction. It's kind of when they're very technical, but they're still a little raw. Rhodey as a vocalist is very dynamic. He's an incredible singer, but he also does a lot of kind of high screechy screaming and some low kind of guttural screaming. So be fair warned, they are a bit of a screamy band, but they're not, that's not like all they do. It's really all over the map. If you enjoy progressive music, like very progressive music, technical music that, you know, plays with time signatures and a lot of push and pulls and a lot of tension building and release and that kind of stuff. You know, if you listen to stuff like Dream Theater and stuff like that, but with like a little bit more interesting vocals, in my opinion, I think you could really get behind it. Yeah.
Okay. And for you now, obviously there's a guitar in the background, but you're a drummer. Is that what attracted you to this band? Was it their drumming style or their heaviness, or what do you think?
Yeah, question. To me, this band just kind of like, I kind of just was introduced to this band at the perfect time. It was right when I was starting to write music of my own when I was in high school. And I think I really appreciated the drumming. It was really the guitar players that really caught my ear with this album. They do it all, and they're very fancy guitarists, but they also know how to just like write interesting music. It's not just like diddly diddly dee for like days. It's very technical guitar playing, but with like with a lot of intent. You know, there's clearly something they're trying to write here. They're not just showing off how fast their fingers can go. And it's kind of just the whole package, honestly. The whole package just comes together with this band. I mean, between the vocalists and his range, the guitarists and what they do together, paired with like some really great bass work and drumming. And with this new album too, they introduced a lot of orchestration this time. So there's like almost like a full orchestra going on in the background, supporting the music and everything like that. So it's really just, it's the complete package. There's kind of fun songs that you can just kind of sing along to. There's other songs that you can kind of like really dig into and try to figure like, what are they doing here? Like, what time signature even is this? And that really cool, fun stuff. Yeah, if you're a musician, I think there's something to love in this band in every album.
All right, Protest the Hero. There you go. Well, thank you, Malcolm, for that. That was a very detailed analysis on Protest the Hero. I don't know if mine gets detailed because this band, from the sounds of it, or at least this artist and band, are like the complete opposite of Protest the Hero. We're talking about the artist Kim Mitchell, and he was originally with a band called Max Webster. So I've got one of the box sets, the vinyl box sets that just came out not too long ago, called Max Webster The Party. So this is classic album selection, 1976 to 1982. In terms of Canadian bands, this has always been one of my favorite Canadian bands. The reason being, Kim Mitchell, who is a guy, just right off the start, because sometimes people think Kim Mitchell's a gal, but Kim Mitchell is a guy. And although on stage he had initially very long hair and would often wear really outlandish costumes, Max Webster was just a fun Canadian band, very good musicians. Kim Mitchell is a fantastic guitarist and a terrific singer. Also part of the band was Terry Watkinson, who was on keyboards. And the band was you could say they were rock, heavy rock, but they really had sort of proggy elements to them, but not too proggy. There was elements of Frank Zappa and a lot of humor, which is interesting for so many Canadian bands, how much humor is at the forefront and makes them kind of different. And then sometimes internationally, they're not really understood because of the humor, I think. Sometimes.
Yeah.
That's sort of thing. So this is the big box set, and I'll just go through some of the albums. So they got together in 1973, pretty much from Sarnia, Ontario area. Kim Mitchell is like the main singer and main writer. In fact, Terry Watkinson wrote tracks, but he didn't sing anything till like the fourth or fifth album with the band. And so it was Kim Mitchell, and he wrote songs with a lyricist. So Kim Mitchell didn't really write the lyrics. It was a fellow by the name of Pi Dubois who wrote the lyrics for Max Webster. Now, Pi Dubois was his pen name. His actual real name is Paul Woods from Sarnia. But Pi Dubois.
Yes, that definitely fancies yourself up.
So this is Max Webster's first album. This one came out in, I believe, 1976, and it's actually Terry Watkinson, the keyboardist, that did the cover. So this kind of gives you an indication that you're going to be in for something a little off mainstream, that sort of thing. So the very first track on here is a track called Hangover, and that kind of sets the tone for both the band, Max Webster, and for Kim Mitchell with the lyrics, you know, Alka-Seltzer Tang and a 50, it's all over, you got a hangover. Like that's the first track. And of course the 50 referring to Labatt's 50, the beer.
Yeah.
Popular enough at the time. So again, for the cover, you know, it's kind of a little bit out there, but Kim Mitchell is also continuing as a solo artist. He's got a new song out called Wishes, and he's got a new album coming out sometime this fall. And in some of the recent interviews he's done of what Max Webster albums he'd like, he can't seem to pick a favorite Max Webster album, but in terms of songs, he really likes this one, Here Among the Cats, which is the second track, which again is pretty rocking. I don't know quite why he picked that one of all of some of the neat early tracks, why he picked that one in particular, but it's a good rocking track, and it's kind of more indicative of where he went as a solo artist. I always thought with Max Webster, there was kind of the two Max Websters going on. There was Kim Mitchell, the guitarist who wanted them to go pretty rock, and then there was Terry Watkinson with his keyboard influence that I think wanted them to maybe go a little bit more progressive. I find Max Webster is more interesting when they're a little bit more progressive, but there's a song on here which is the absolute silliest song called Toronto Tontos, and this kind of features the lyrics of Pi Dubois. Again, just really silly and really just a lot of humor. Now that's the first album. It's a little uneven. I mean, it's a good album, but it's a little uneven. To me, this is actually their best album. So this is High Class and Borrowed Shoes, and here's what I mean by, you know, Kim Mitchell, you know, at first glance, you know, you're maybe not exactly quite sure. So this is Kim Mitchell here. This is Terry Watkinson, the keyboardist. And by the second album, they had a new drummer already. So this is Gary McCracken on drums and Mike Tiltka, who was on bass, and then he would leave the band after this album, and then would go on to be a producer, and then would produce a few of the albums for Max Webster, which is kind of interesting.
You see a lot these days, actually. Like you see a lot of band members that'll leave, but then still be kind of like part of producing the band. There's one of my other favorite bands, Periphery, has done that. Their bassist was actually doing a lot of the recording for their albums, and he decided he didn't want to go on tour anymore. So he doesn't tour with them anymore, but he still records the bass for all of their albums and still records and produces all the albums. Okay. So he's still like a part of the band, but he just was like, I don't want to tour anymore. That just seems like a lot of work. Like I'd rather just like stay home and make music. So yeah, like you see, it's not a bad move. Especially if you have like a good working relationship. It's just like, man, being in a band is so much work though, between rehearsals and touring, and you know, and now with social media, you have to keep like a presence all the time too. Like it's exhausting. Like a lot of my friends in bands, like, you know, say it's like it's hard to, you know, balance all of it all together and then still like maintain a life.
Yeah, no kidding. So Max Webster were label mates with the band Rush. So Max Webster would often open up for Rush, and they were all very good friends. And in fact, Harry Brown, who was a Rush producer, would then start to produce a few of the Max Webster albums, and starting off with this one. So to me, this one, like High Class and Borrowed Shoes, and then you have the ballad Diamonds, Diamonds. Gravity then that gets into kind of nice jazzy stuff. On the Road, and a really nice acoustic track. And then when you get into the proggy stuff, it's In Context of the Moon, nice long track, you know, over 5 minutes. And so Max Webster, the nice thing was that there was quite a variety. As I said, it still felt like it was always pulling in two different directions between like the guitar and then the keyboards. But the one nice thing about this band is the variety on each album. Like you're getting acoustic, you're getting kind of almost country leanings, and then, you know, super heavy rock. Like Kim Mitchell is quite the, you know, prolific guitarist. Like it's a lot of really fast guitar work. So that's their second album. Their third album is okay. This is Mutiny Up My Sleeve, though this has the song The Party, which was kind of a nice, you know, rocking sing-along songs for in concert. But then this also has a very proggy track called Beyond the Moon. And I saw Max Webster a couple of times. I definitely saw them once in Stratford, Ontario. And again, this is pretty much the way they looked on stage. So now Mike Tiltka has left the band, and then this bassist Dave Miles is part of the band. So this now is pretty much the classic lineup of Max Webster. So they would go on to be together for their next several albums. But again, even like this is what they were always like on stage. It was just these ridiculous outfits. Kim Mitchell then would sometimes come out with the Google-eyed glasses. You know, it was just,
They're just having fun.
you know, anything for attention, that sort of thing, you know, and just that sort of thing. So, yeah, so this is now on Anthem Records. And then this, to me, was the album that I really thought that they were going to take it to the next level, was A Million Vacations. This is a terrific album, and with these, you know, classic sort of Canadiana postcards here. Now, when this album first came out, I do have a copy of it where they don't have the eyes blacked out on the postcards. I don't know if that's been a copyright issue or something like that, but all subsequent reissues of this album always black out all the eyes, but initially they didn't have that on the postcard. So this kind of captures, especially that Ontario kind of feel, heading off to Grand Bend. It has kind of a whole sort of beach theme, if you will. And this, I thought, was going to be the album to really take them to the next level. Paradise Skies, a great track to kick things off. A Million Vacations, that song still gets played a lot on the radio. And it wasn't until this album that Terry Watkinson, who did write some songs, at least on every album, they would be sung by Kim Mitchell, but this was the first album that Terry Watkinson on keyboards finally sang lead vocals on. And they had the hit, Let Go the Line. So the first album he sings on, and then they actually had one of their biggest radio hits, sort of a ballad kind of song called Let Go the Line. So interesting with this, as I said, I thought, okay, now they've really done it. You know, they're continuing to tour with Rush on a big level. The biggest problem with the band is that they really just did not get support from their record label. I think around this time, they were looking to do some big tours in England, possibly with Rush or without Rush, and then the record company didn't back them, and then sure enough, that fell through. Band members then started to drift away, and I'll show you the next two albums. But it's interesting how it doesn't matter how talented the bands are, what great music they're doing, or you know their drive. If you haven't got that support, especially through this is the 70s when record companies were still king. If you haven't got that support from the label, then forget about it. You know.
You know, you're absolutely right, and you kind of see that just kind of in any art medium too. I mean, there's movies too. There's like some amazing movies out there that like it's very clear the studio didn't push, so they didn't do very well when they came out, but they're fantastic films, you know. So yeah, unfortunately, like when you're in an art-driven industry that's subservient to labels or like these big companies, if they don't back you, then and you don't know how to kind of DIY it, then you're going to kind of flounder. And that kind of, interesting wraps back to Protest the Hero. Like they were tired of 180 record deals, and they were tired of these record deals where it's like, you know, we're not really supporting the band. We're just a bank. We're going to loan you $320,000 to make this record. You owe all of that money back. Plus we get a percentage, plus we own the masters, plus any money you make, we get a percentage because we loaned you this money. You know what I mean? Like that's really, and you know, for a lot of bands, they're just really waking up to that like if a record label is just a long-term loan with 17% interest, then like what are we doing here? Especially because now record labels are increasingly aware of this, so they're not taking chances on bands as much anymore. Like honestly, I don't think if you can't put your own numbers on the board right now on the internet, then like a record label isn't really going to give you two looks, because like you have to have, you know, because everything's very visual now. So like they can see like how many likes do they have on their page on Facebook? How many views do they have on their YouTube channel? How many listeners do they have on their Spotify? How many subscribers do they have on all these things? Like if you're not breaking these numbers where you're kind of proving that you're already doing it pretty well yourself, a record label's not picking up. But then at the same time, it's like, do you need a record label if you're able to produce these numbers on your own? So for a lot of musicians nowadays, it comes to that make it or break it moment where it's like, what is the record label going to do for you that you actually need to pursue that? And if they do, like, how do you strike a good deal so that you're not kind of left in the dust of your own record deal?
Yeah, exactly. And at least though now for bands, at least there are some options, because you know back in the day, 60s and 70s, yes, there were independently produced records, but overall it was still, the record label was king, whereas now at least you do have some options. And often,
there's no excuse now. Honestly, there's no excuse not to produce your own music now. You know, if you get a MacBook, it comes with GarageBand, which is a full audio recording suite. Like, it's a full DAW that works incredibly well. Like, yeah, a MacBook is pretty expensive, but you can get a used one from like 4 or 5 years ago for like a quarter of the price. Microphone, like all the equipment is so much more accessible now. It's really, anything you need to learn, you can look up on YouTube. I just finished my first EP and I got CDs. I got just a limited 50 run of CDs printed. I think I paid $150 for all of them. Like, that's really not that much. And then the rest I'm just throwing on Spotify. I pay, a contractor called DistroKid. I pay them $25 a year, and they just host it on all of the streaming platforms. And then I just have to deal with one vendor as opposed to like 20. Yeah, I mean, like, there's, you can kind of get into a lot of arguments about like how good is Spotify for the artist and all these kind of other things, but like the bottom line is there really aren't gatekeepers when it comes to getting your music out there and sharing your music with other people. I mean, you could do it all through Facebook if you wanted to, all through Instagram. You could only post songs to Instagram, which is 100% free. And people, there's a lot of musicians that's how they kind of raise their profile. They post minute videos of them just like playing something on the guitar almost every other day. And people are like, wow, this guy's really good. And then, eventually they go, I have an album coming out. And they go, well, I've been like checking out your little diddly dees like every week for the last year. Yeah, I'll see if you can make a whole album of diddly dees. Like,
Good point. Good point. Okay, I'll show you just the last couple of Max Webster albums. Again, when Max Webster were making records, there was no Spotify or Instagram or like that. It was all, it was record labels for king and then radio was king for sure. Okay, so they did put out the obligatory live album, Live Magnetic Arrogance, still with the classic lineup. That sort of thing. So, and the one thing I should mention about Max Webster, which I've always loved about this band more than other bands, their studio albums, the energy on their studio albums is fantastic, especially, through the 70s when bands in the studios didn't always capture their sound and they always sounded much better live in concert or even on their live albums. The energy, like when you put on High Class and Borrowed Shoes, right from the word go, bam, the energy is right there. And you really feel it. It's infectious. Just how good they were in the studio and how they really captured their sound in the studio. Way more so, in my opinion, than a lot of other bands, for sure.
What do you think you attribute that to? Do you think that's like, do you think that's just the raw talent of the band? Is that the studio they went to? Or, because like a lot of people will make the argument too that everything is over-processed and over-edited now.
Yeah.
The feel of the music.
Yeah, could be a few things. Could be Mike, the bass player who left, who really understood the sound of the band, was able to capture that. Certainly working with Rush producer Jerry Brown, I think helps because I think Jerry Brown's a good producer. And I think they were a great band. Like Kim Mitchell's a great guitarist, great studio artist, and I think that really lends itself to it. Because especially and then you get into issues where then you bring in a whole different producer who has a whole different attitude, a different way of doing things that can be good and then sometimes not so good. So
because really the producer thinks their role is. Like, is their role to just sort of guide the band to the end, or is their role to make the band into something? Like every producer has their own approach, but that you're right, that relationship with the band and their relationship with other bands too plays a huge factor.
Yeah. So this is their last album, and I don't know where the name Max Webster came from. This was not their original name. They had done a few names before they finally settled on Max Webster, but I've never heard where Max Webster came from, whether it was an individual that they knew or they just took two names, put it together. I've never heard the story, and even in hearing Kim Mitchell's latest interviews, I've never heard why they came up with Max Webster. Again, it's one of those, because then they think it's just one person of the band, like, who's Max Webster? So, this is the last album, Universal and Juveniles. A lot more of a Kim Mitchell album, and as you can see, it is just Kim Mitchell on the cover, because pretty much by this time, Terry Watkinson had already left the band. Dave Miles, the bass player, left after this album was released. So the tour for this album was pretty much an ad hoc band, because then I think even Gary McCracken left the band as well. So he had to assemble musicians to complete the tour. And then it was kind of the feeling of, why are we continuing Max Webster? We've had so many people leave the band. So that's after this is when Kim Mitchell embarked on a solo album. This album, again, there's not a lot of keyboards on it. It almost kind of sets the template for Kim Mitchell's solo act, which is a lot more guitar driven, maybe a little bit more radio friendly driven, not as long tracks. But this album is noted for the track Battle Scar, which is a complete collaboration with Max Webster and Rush. You know, again, as I mentioned, they often toured together. They were label mates. So the track Battle Scar, which features all the Max Webster members and the Rush members together in the studio, it was first featured on this album. But it's interesting, the Battle Scar now is a big, you know, radio FM staple, at least in Canada. But when it initially came out, it almost was kind of overlooked. I don't know, again, interest in Max Webster at the time was starting to drift off, and maybe that track got overlooked. But now, my gosh, if you turn on FM classic rock radio, you're eventually going to hear Battle Scar for sure. So Battle Scar is featured on this album. And then I'll just quickly go through the Kim Mitchell stuff. You know, it's interesting, you know, fans of Kim Mitchell would know his solo stuff more than his days with Max Webster. He first put out an EP simply called Kim Mitchell, and now he's kind of changed his look a little bit. He's kind of going with the cap. He doesn't tend to go with the jacket and, you know, the vest and the tie sort of thing, but he kind of changed his look a little bit. And then he started going pretty radio friendly, pretty rock, but Go for Soda was featured on his first full length album called Akimbo A Logo, which is a great title. This label, the album cover has changed. Initially it was a silhouette, and then they changed it to this, and then they changed it after this because there was issues, I think, of him with the cigarette in his mouth, with the dart in his mouth. So Go for Soda is, you know, it's such a great radio rock hit. You know, it's one of those just feel good songs, and that sets the mood. Now, interesting with Kim Mitchell, for his solo career, though, he's continued to work with Pi Dubois. So it's kind of like the Max Webster sound continuing, only without the keyboards, without any of the kind of proggy stuff. So I don't have everything of Kim Mitchell. This was also a very big album, Kim Mitchell and Shaken Like a Human Being. The lovely track Patio Lanterns, which is just, again, just a lovely radio-friendly hit. But also on this one is the track Atlanta Loves Me. And yeah, it's a great album. Kim Mitchell, again, then the albums pretty much have that rocking radio-friendly sound. This is Kim Mitchell and Rockland. And then we have Kim Mitchell, I Am a Wild Party. Not one of my favorite Kim Mitchell songs. There's something about that song I don't really care for. But it was a big hit. And then Kim Mitchell, this one is called, what is this album called? It's like Scratch or something like that. Yeah, it's Kim Mitchell there scratching himself for whatever reason. And then Kim Mitchell, Best of Greatest Hits. That features all the tracks. And he has a new song out that has a little bit more of a country feel to it. And I think the new album, I can't remember what the title of it's called. It's not out yet. It should be coming out in the fall, where he is going to do, it's going to be a lot more ballady, a little bit more country leaning. And I found out recently, I didn't know with Kim Mitchell, that he had some sort of falling out with Pi Dubois. So they are no longer writing together. And it's been about 10 years or so. And according to Kim Mitchell in one of the interviews, that there was like some sort of cease and desist order from Pi Dubois. So they are the Elton John, Bernie Taupin years with Kim Mitchell and Pi Dubois are no longer a thing. But they were together like through all the Max Webster years, and then through most of his solo career. It was always co-writing tracks together. So there you go. Great guitarist, I think a great singer, fun performer, and certainly in interviews, he's just a decent guy. And it's definitely a band worth exploring, Max Webster. I would definitely start, personally, for me, High Class and Borrowed Shoes, without a doubt. Their second album, absolutely terrific. Okay. Absolutely terrific.
Yeah. Very cool.
And you weren't familiar with Max Webster before, Max Webster / Kim Mitchell?
No, not really at all. No.
Okay, I mean, so a band.
The name sounded familiar, but like, if you like quizzed me on it, I wouldn't answer it. I wouldn't have an answer for it.
Oh, there you go. So that was fantastic. So thank you so much for this, Malcolm. So Protest the Hero and Max Webster, two bands you can definitely check out. Now, Protest the Hero, have any of the members of that band done any solo stuff? or is it just in the band sort of thing?
Not really. They've kind of just stayed in the band. Like if once they, you know, the two members, once they left, they kind of did some other stuff. RF, the original bassist, ended up going into oh, what's it called? Like live stage theater, and he was like in a pit band for like quite some time and stuff like that. And then I think I had read that like Mo ended up just going back to school after he left the band. But like for the most part, these guys, like this is the band. Like this is pretty much the project that they do. And it's the one that I follow the most because it's the one where I think they're doing everything they want to do, you know. I think it's the real thing.
Yeah. And I just found out recently, like Terry Watkinson, the keyboardist, had left the band, and I just thought he sort of just kind of dropped out because I never heard anything. But I read recently that Terry Watkinson and the bass player producer Mike Tilka had formed a band called the Antlers, and they did Max Webster songs and other classic rock songs. I don't think they did any recordings. And there's another band called the Antlers that they're not to be confused with. But apparently they had been together for quite some time, I guess, just playing live, gigging, that sort of thing. But like Terry Watkinson never, as far as I understood, released any solo records or anything like that. And yeah, you just never know where the rock and roll road will be. All right. Well, thank you so much for this, Malcolm. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for doing this. And maybe we'll have to do another one, maybe focus on some different bands, or we could focus on some of the music that you have put together, if you wish. Like you have some new music that's out. We could talk about that. And, you know, maybe, I don't know if we can play any of it or whatever, but have to clear the copyrights with you.
Well, we won't have Warner Music coming in and, you know, taking down your videos or anything.
Yeah, exactly. You never know. You never know. Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much for this. And yeah, we'll have to do this again down the road, and we'll maybe take a look at some other bands because I mean, as we've mentioned, there's a lot of bands that you know, and then bands that I know. So it's kind of interesting to get together.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's fun to see the evolution of bands too. Like my mind is already kind of like rolling about like, oh, like it'd be kind of fun to like do a little analysis of this other band too. That's kind of really just evolving their sound over the years too. And now I have like a great like playlist of music to listen to and catch up on. So I'm probably going to do that for the rest of the day.
Sounds good. Well, everyone, my son, Malcolm Cottle. Malcolm, thank you so much for doing this. And that's going to do it for me. Jamie will, of course, chat again. I'll have more box set videos from my box set collection coming out soon enough, and more contest entries going on too. So thank you very much and take care. Bye-bye.